Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, let me apologize for not having a show out earlier than at this point today. We just got our power back here after a powerful storm had moved through the region on Tuesday evening, and so I've been without power for a little over 28 hours. So, with that said, let's go ahead and delve into what's been going on in the news. This first piece that I'm going to focus on here will form the theme of today's Holo Flight Special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. We've warned you now for 10 months straight here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that Donald J. Trump's fanfare with the media would come to a swift and immediate end. The Washington Examiner has unleashed an article in which it has been discovered that the Washington Post, which is now owned by Jeff Bezos of Amazon infamy, has been hiring an army of reporters to dig up dirt on the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller. Now, to the credit of the Washington Post, they're also looking into the past dealings of the presumptive Democrat frontrunner Hillary Rotten Clinton. But remember what we said, going back to last summer, that the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media would eventually turn on the New York vulgarian, and that once they did, the veneer of the Teflon Don would vanish in the blink of an eye. Of course, his most ardent acolytes and followers within the rank and file of the Branch Trumpidians are dismissive of it, just as they have been dismissive of everything that has occurred thus far with respect to the Donald's consistently inconsistent positions. One of the things that I noticed in the comment section for this Washington Examiner piece that we will be delving into in more detail as the show goes on is that some of the Trump people said, "Didn't you get the memo? The more that you attack Donald Trump, the more that it galvanizes his base of support." Well, that may be fine, but when it comes to terms of winning a general election, you can't win it with just one solid core constituency. The failed candidacies of John McCain and then later Mitt Romney proved that to be the truth. The problem is, if you don't have the core constituents of the conservatives, along with the various other factions that form up the Republican Party's base, then you are not going to win the election. There really is no other way to parse this, folks. There's no other way to describe it other than what the facts on the ground have shown in election cycle after election cycle. I hate to be the bearer of bad news for the Trump supporters. Well, no, let's be realistic. I am just pointing to the fact of a "see, I told you so" moment that is clear here and open and obvious for everyone who is looking at the facts in an objective fashion to see. The fact of the matter is that Donald J. Trump is a weak candidate. But it is also important that he not be underestimated. I think if there was one mistake that was made not only by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, but also by some of the conservatives, is that you can't just write Donald J. Trump off. He is far too much of a dirty fighter, or one who plays dirty in the arena of American politics, simply to write off as not a threat. That may be something that plays to his benefit in the general election. However, I highly doubt it, due to the fact that his negatives are so high. Of course, the Branch Trumpidians are going to say that that doesn't matter, that he's been, able to overcome all of that and every step of the way thus far, especially throughout the primary season. But again, a primary victory, which he hasn't even fully secured yet, though at this point it is looking like it would take an intervention from Providence above to prevent it, he is the presumptive nominee. But he still hasn't won the 1237 delegates. Either way, when you look at it, we warned that he would eventually face a hostile media from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and that when they turned against him, it would become a cornucopia of attack pieces, hit ads. Why? Because, as we all know, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have a propagandistic agenda. There is no question that the entire purpose of their mission, and indeed their holistic goal for this entire process, is to advance the Fabian socialist cause in leaps and bounds, more so than in the traditional incremental baby steps that Fabianism is known for. They are frothing at the mouth, and hence they are the salivating mainstream media, to get their socialistic agenda to take root in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Again, this is why we said it was so important that we foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights, which have been endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature. Of course, this warning, for the most part, by those who are adhering to the wide-eyed claims of the New York vulgarian, have not been heeded. And so we now face an uphill battle if things don't change and if that miracle never comes to fruition. So what is it exactly that we are going to be facing? Well, look at who it is that owns the Washington Post now. Jeff Bezos, a businessman and billionaire, not much unlike Donald J. Trump himself. And you see, that means that it is going to be a long, drawn-out, and bloody fight, and one in which we probably, looking at the political tea leaves here, won't win. Now, that's not to say that it is impossible for Donald Trump to win. It's just that it is all but impossible for him to win. That the media will parse it a certain way, they will twist his words, which is very easy to do because he so frequently speaks out of both sides of his mouth, and that will work to be his undoing in this general election cycle. It means that Hillary Clinton is going to be entering this with a great advantage. Of course, we knew she would be irrespective of who the gutless opposition party nominee would wind up being. However, we now have the weakest Republican candidate as the presumptive nominee for the party. And now, as we have shown through his many past flip-flops and his consistently inconsistent positions all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, it will be easy pickings for them to dig up dirt. Just think of the way that he handled the Polish Brigade issue. Don't think that they won't use immigration reform, the very platform that he used to gain such a rapid ascendancy, to attack him. And while it may galvanize his own base, remember that when he said that he didn't need or even want conservative support, in so much as he would be able to bring in disenfranchised Bernie Sanders supporters to the Republican Party, if the media blitz works as they are planning for it to, those Sanders voters, disenfranchised as they may be, will never support the Donald. I'm sorry, folks, that's just the way that the facts will play out. Remember, these people adore their graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. It has been an instrument in their arsenal used to bludgeon conservatives for generations. And that is certainly not going to change this election cycle. Yes, there has been a claim by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that this is the election cycle in which we will discard with conventional wisdom. But at some point, even the veneer of the flashy and the new and that which is the outsider will lose its appeal. Sure, it'll maintain that appeal with his base, but it won't gain broader support. And if he does not gain broader support, particularly in voting blocs that have been stalwarts for the gutless opposition party, or GOP, then he will be facing inevitable defeat in the general election cycle. This is what we have been warning about for 10 months now, folks. 10 months we have been saying that he would be an untenable candidate. And if you look at the fact that the media was the one that selected him to be the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party, it goes without saying that they will also hold all the cards that will be able to destroy him, that will be able to crucify him in the public sphere. And when they do that, through their dissemination of information, it will tarnish him. It will be damaging. Of course, his followers don't care. They have swept every complaint and every red flag about the New York billionaire under the rug because they have so wholeheartedly bought into his infallibility, both as a person and as a candidate. But what will it spell for us when the media really turns against him? It's going to be a bloodbath. We've already seen that the primary season was the most heated and contentious in living memory. I have a feeling that this general election will be no different. The main difference that we will see come to the forefront and the surface is that Hillary Clinton will not hold back punches with Donald Trump. She will hit him from the start, and this will galvanize her base of support. It will sway many of the independents who remain undecided in this election cycle. While we have never really liked the fact that the independents are vastly growing in number in America, it cannot be ignored that it does have a pivotal impact on the electorate here. And we're going to see that play out in the general election. All of a sudden, it will allow the Fabian socialists to once again succeed in their claim that a demographic shift in the United States of America is unfurling before our very eyes, and that this will diametrically oppose everything that the gutless opposition party supposes to put forward or proposes to put forward. In that sense, the Donald is still the main problem that we have been facing with him ever since his bizarre ascendancy began. He fulfills all of the two-dimensional stereotypes that the Fabian socialist left attempts to pigeonhole the right with here in the United States, and it is going to play into their favor in front of the media circus that will be this general election cycle. Folks, it would be laughable if the consequences weren't so serious, because the United States of America right now, as I speak into this microphone, is in the midst of both a constitutional and identity crisis, the likes of which we also have not encountered in our living memory. The Barack Hussein Obama regime has worked tirelessly and incessantly towards the destabilization of this once thriving and flourishing republic. All of this done to tear down that which existed before and to replace it with a Fabian socialist system. And Donald J. Trump's past will expose that. In other words, the left will finally be able to point to a Republican and say, look at just how much of a farce and a scam this man really is. Do not buy into the claims of the P.T. Barnum of our era, or into the claims of a snake oil salesman who will say whatever he needs just to benefit himself. And remember the fact that he likes to boast about his own greed and being a part of the billionaire class. All of that will also play to his great detriment in the political kabuki theater that will be the disaster of this 2016 general election. Again, folks, this is the very sort of thing that we tried to prevent from happening by warning you of the dangers of a Donald Trump candidacy for these past arduous 10 months. Now it is starting to come to fruition. It is something that we will not be able to escape, and of course the followers of Trump will lay the blame at the feet of their favorite scapegoat. True constitutionalists and conservatives who cannot bear the thought of having to stomach the New York businessman, billionaire, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian will be the target of their wrath and rage, much as they have been all throughout this primary process. But remember the old adage that states elections have consequences. That's something that the Branch Trumpidians have ignored time and again all throughout this election cycle thus far. It cannot be ignored because it is there, blatant, open, and obvious for anyone who is looking at this in an objective fashion to see. Our candidate is out of the race, so it means that we are just looking at this in an objective fashion. We have let you know what our heartfelt positions are throughout this primary season so that you will take what we say as for what it is. Again, we don't expect you to take everything that we say at face value. In fact, we don't expect you to take anything we say at face value. We want you to empower yourselves by looking into this for yourselves. Now, there is a truly interesting aspect with respect to this Washington Examiner piece. Yes, Bezos has offered and ordered, essentially, his army of reporters to dig into Trump and Hillary, but you know that his left-leaning stance will mean that the narrative shall be slanted as it always is. They will use it to say, gee, it's really sad that Bernie Sanders wasn't able to gain traction, but look at how much better Hillary Clinton is than Donald J. Trump, a man who is a worse liar than she is. You see, they will see this as an opportunity, and they will seize upon the opportunity to now paint Hillary Clinton's lying as a virtue. It's a virtue in comparison to the consistently inconsistent positions peddled by the New York vulgarian. And this will have resonance with the disenfranchised Bernie Sanders voters. They will not, as Trump predicts, flock to him, and that will mean that Trump is going into the general election without the support of the strong base of the Republican Party, and it also means that Hillary Clinton will be bolstered. This is everything that we warned you about. It is coming to fruition. It is unfurling before our very eyes. And the fact that Trump is now the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, just as we said they would, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are already starting to set their sights on the clucking dawn. When they unleash their salvos on Donald J. Trump, it will be disastrous for him. It will play out like a bad melodrama. But remember that some of his highest staff and personnel said that the office of President of the United States and the quest to achieve that office would be the highest form of reality television. Again, whether he claims that it's like running a business, or whether he claims that it is like reality television, the fact of the matter stays true and consistent, that the United States of America cannot be run like a business, and that it is certainly not a reality television program because our fundamental and inalienable rights are at stake. Everything that we hold near and dear is at stake. That is why everything is so important. And yet our warnings went unheeded. Nevertheless, we must band together in solidarity and unity. Now, more than ever, we must stand in staunch opposition to any and all forces who seek to operate outside the proper scope and application of government as mandated by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Remember, we have said since the airing of our first program that the Constitution is the key to all that ails our once thriving and flourishing representative republic. Now, more so than ever, does this ring true, as we see the inevitable train wreck that is the Trump train unfurl before our very eyes. Now, when we look at this article that came out of the Washington Examiner, we see that Bob Woodward, who came to infamy during the Watergate investigation of the Richard Nixon administration, is already peddling protections for Hillary Clinton, trying to say that no, she didn't actually intend to deceive the American people as Richard Milhouse Nixon did all throughout the Watergate scandal. He's splitting hairs here and playing that dangerous, dark, and twisted game of semantics that the Fabian socialists always play. It is intellectually disingenuous, yet it is the danger that we face and have warned you about going back these past 10 arduous months. So, how will this play out in the arena of American politics? I have a feeling it's going to be a bloodbath, one of the worst bloodbaths of living memory. That we may see a Walter Mondale-style landslide, but not as Rush Limbaugh predicts, in favor of the New York Vulgarian. I fear it will play out in favor of Hillary Clinton. Of course, I could be wrong in my predictions here. Nevertheless, I think that the historical evidence shows a strong case for my position. You can look into it yourself and see that whenever you have an unpopular candidate that waffles on any and every important key issue, that it does not bode well for that candidate in the general election. I know that I have oft times mentioned on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the candidacy of John Kerry in the 2004 presidential election cycle fell to doom due to Kerry's constant flip-flopping. Well, Kerry was at least more consistent in that he always supported left-wing ideology and rhetoric, as opposed to Donald J. Trump, who is a Johnny-come-lately with respect to conservative positions, and he already started abandoning them, no less than 24 hours after Texas Senator Ted Cruz officially suspended his campaign for the White House. That means that he will be facing a juggernaut of Hillary Clinton, and his flip-flops and waffling will be used against him. Again, it raises that nagging question as to whether this was Donald J. Trump's intention since he officially threw his hat in the ring last July. I have a feeling that it is, but it will be interesting to see how it plays out, because the factors are already lining up. The Branch Trumpidians will ignore his very many weaknesses. In fact, there are so many skeletons in the closet of Donald J. Trump that it might as well be called a cemetery. I hate to be crass, but that is the way that it appears. There are so many outlandish things that he's put up on Twitter that will come back to bite him and haunt him all throughout this general election cycle. Remember that a virtuous republic requires a man or woman of character, high standing, and honor to vie for the highest office in the land. If they are lacking in those characteristics, it will come back to haunt them in the day of judgment. Of course, an election cycle, particularly a presidential election cycle, that day of judgment comes on election day itself. And I have a feeling that there are going to be a great many Americans who are surprised by the outcome and the results. Yet, we are in such an untenable situation right now, and in an unwinnable situation right now, that irrespective of who actually wins the reins of political power in the United States, we are going to see a third term of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. Remember that one of the things that the armies of reporters for Jeff Bezos's Washington Post will be able to dig up is Trump's statements in favor of Hillary Rotten Clinton. And not just Hillary Rotten Clinton. Remember that he went on to the Larry King Live program on CNN to sing the praises of Barack Hussein Obama shortly after he secured the reins of political power in America, and said that he was doing great things, that he had accomplished things that no one dreamed possible. But what are those things that he was singing the praises of? Failed policies like cash for clunkers, failed policies such as the continuation of the big bank bailouts. Yet, didn't Trump and his entire camp attack a good and decent man in Texas Senator Ted Cruz, saying that he was owned by Goldman Sachs because his wife happened to work for the banking giant? Well, remember that his campaign financier, after he had promised that he would be self-funding, is a partner at Goldman Sachs and was a bigwig in one of George Soros's financing campaigns. As for the media blitz that is about to be unleashed upon the clucking dawn, we can say that this is just the cost of doing business for a businessman like Jeff Bezos. Really, that is the type of thing you will see play out. The language of the trumpeteers will be turned against them and will be plunged squarely in the back of the Trump train, derailing it once and for all. We tried to warn you about this over the past several 10 months, and yet the Trumpsters chose to ignore us. They chose to belittle us and to label us. But it's not about us. It is about the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in America. It is about we the people. You see, this is why the Constitution holds such great importance. Pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, as we've stated on past episodes, the Constitution itself actually constitutes the supreme law of the land. That is the supreme truth that is self-evident. It is the truth we cannot escape. It is the truth that we must understand and adhere to. But in this election cycle, the truth has been obfuscated for far too long. In fact, for such a long extent of time that a great many people have begun to doubt the veracity of the truth itself. Yet, as we have also said on past episodes, the truth always has a way of coming through. The light of truth will shine upon the frauds, the hucksters, the charlatans, and it means that this forceful takeover of the Republican Party, the redefining of the Republican Party into such an institution that true conservatives are no longer welcomed from the own lips of the presumptive nominee, will play out like the disaster that it truly is. You see, you cannot win without the conservative base. We are the heart and soul of the Republican Party. If you remove that, you gut the party and destroy its effectiveness. Now the question is how much damage Trump will do to the conservative movement and to the Republican Party itself. How will this play out in the down ticket battles, which are growing to be an ugly and nasty bloodbath of epic proportions? Are we going to lose our control of the Senate and maybe potentially the House of Representatives as well? It's much less likely with the House of Representatives. However, I think it is a real possibility that we could lose the Senate once again. Can you imagine what disaster that would unfold with after the results of this general election come in? if Hillary Clinton does win the presidency, as it is seeming very likely that she will now, it will not play out well for the United States of America. But we should not give up faith and hope. We should do as Ted Cruz wanted the conservative movement to do. We should band together and maintain the base of the party, the platforms and positions of the party, because we must build now for a comeback. Should we fail to do so, it will be disastrous for generations yet to come. You see, when we warned about Donald Trump, it wasn't just for this 2016 election cycle that our warnings were meant for. We were looking at the elections to come down the road. We were looking for the State of the Union as it would be if the continued status quo were allowed to thrive and flourish as it has under the two disastrous terms of this Barack Hussein Obama regime. Remember, when it comes to the fate of nations, you must always look at the larger picture, not just the snapshot or instant in time. If we are going to remain as a viable political movement, we must take the steps now to defend our positions and to ensure that our way of life and that our beliefs and positions are not squandered, are not destroyed, and do not become quaint memories in the annals of American polity and history. That is the stance we take now, because if we fail to take that stance now, history will judge us most harshly for allowing a vulgarian of the caliber of Donald Trump to take over the gutless opposition party, or GOP. Folks, there's another sign that the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian doesn't realize that the media blitz will be wholly detrimental to him. Of course, that is the fact that he has now come out in direct contradiction of his past statements and said that his moratorium or ban on Islamic immigration into the United States was just a suggestion. He's walking it back, particularly after he was scoffed at with respect to London's new mayor, who came out and said that even though Donald Trump had said he was a great example and that he would be an exception to the moratorium on Islamic immigration, he would not accept to go about that because it would go against his heartfelt beliefs. But what it does show is that Donald Trump, already this early in the election process, is beginning to walk back his statements, much like he said he would if you looked at the way that he mapped out his negotiations in his book, The Art of the Deal. It's fascinating to see this play out in the way that it has, even with the disastrous consequences that this will undoubtedly have on our representative republic, because it shows that that sort of mentality that he has made part of his entire business strategy of duping people will only work in the primary process. It will not carry through to fruition in the general election cycle. And as we have warned now, here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, for the past 10 months, this would play out with disastrous consequences. So, he's now saying that it was a mere suggestion. So, again, what is it that he was saying? When was he telling the truth? And when was he lying? One of the favorite questions that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, likes to pose is, was he lying then, or is he lying now? And I've always added the last part of, or has he always been lying? That's the thing with Donald J. Trump. He has lied so often that he truly is a pathological liar. And as with all pathological liars, I don't think he is able to differentiate between the falsehoods he has spewed and the reality that is on the ground. Those are the stark facts we have to deal with now, folks. Since he is the presumptive nominee of the gutless opposition party, and the Branch Trumpidians are working feverishly towards cajoling us into unity behind an unacceptable candidate, it will play out the way that it does. The base of the Republican Party will be so hopelessly divided that he is really going to be playing catch-up all throughout the general election process. Again, it reminds us that there are consequences for the choices and decisions that we make. And to move away from that would be to go against everything that our founding fathers stood up for and fought for in that long and bloody struggle that was known as the American War of Independence. Remember that those tenets are still a part of us. They flow in our veins and are an inseparable part of the national character, heritage, spirit, and identity, as well as DNA of the United States of America. These are just the facts as they exist on the ground, and there is no way to sugarcoat them. There is no way to escape their drastic impacts, and we must be prepared to move forward with our own goals. Remember that by gaining and fostering that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the United States Constitution, and thereby also our fundamental and inalienable rights, we learn how to stand up to those nefarious forces which are diametrically opposed to all that we hold near and dear about this once thriving and flourishing representative republic, and that is to say no. It is a very powerful two-letter word within the English lexicon, and it is one that is almost universally understood. Again, this is why those who have made the principled vow of the #NeverTrump movement weren't joking when they made that vow. It's why they will not back away from it. Of course, it will make us all the proverbial and favorite scapegoats of the Trumpvidians and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, when inevitable defeat arrives at our doorsteps. But we were the ones that warned. We were the ones that tried to say, if you selected this man, it would lead to that inevitable heartbreaking defeat that is staring us in the face. You see, this election cycle was ours to lose. And by selecting an unacceptable, third-rate candidate, we have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Hillary Clinton should have been the weakest candidate that the Democrat Party could foist upon the American people. Yet we here in the Republican Party decided to foist an even weaker candidate on us. And as we have said on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, this is a sort of reverse of conservative pundit Rush Limbaugh's Operation Chaos that dominated the 2008 election cycle. Remember, at his urging, many conservatives crossed over in the open primaries to vote for then thought of as weakest and most unelectable candidate Barack Hussein Obama. That came back to bite us, as he went on to serve not only one disastrous term, but two disastrous terms of the most divisive presidential regime and imperial presidencies of living memory. Now, between either of the two choices that are the mainstay party's nominees, or at least presumptive nominees, we are facing a situation where there is no lesser of two evils. In fact, by bowing down and capitulating to the very notion of selecting the lesser of two evils in election cycle after election cycle, we have given carte blanche to the powers that be to continue to foist these unacceptable candidates towards us. It is what has started the downward death spiral of the United States of America, or at least as we know it. And therefore we must band together in solidarity and unity and do everything in our power to say enough is enough, that we will no longer accept this false and erroneous notion of selecting the lesser of two evils. Evil is evil. No matter how you parse it, that is how it plays out. So if Donald Trump was not serious about his claim on the moratorium of Islamo-fascism immigration, then what is he serious about? Is he serious about the wall? Well, not really. And again, he hasn't even gone into particulars or details to explain how we would fund this wall, how we would go about securing the cooperation of private landholders who own some of the southern border. Remember, it's not a cut and dry, easy thing. Our southern border is a vast border. And there are pieces of the terrain which compose that southern border that would make a wall exceedingly difficult to build and dangerous to build as well, if not all out impossible. And then there is some of the claims we've heard that the Great Wall of China worked and the Berlin Wall worked. But if we pause and think about it for a moment, what was the inevitable outcome for both of those walls? Albeit for different and unique circumstances and reasons, they both ultimately failed. You see, if we wall the border without any consideration of securing it through other means and allocating funds to it in a proper fashion that won't already drain the overtaxed and overburdened taxpayers, we will see that wall inevitably fail if it even comes into existence. The problem is that Donald J. Trump is consistently inconsistent with respect to these magic conservative positions which he assumedly picked up overnight. Because for the vast majority of his adult life, he has espoused nothing but the hardline progressive point of view. He has embraced Fabian socialism, and he may be the Republicans' Manchurian candidate. Again, these are the dark and twisted realities of his past that we have attempted to warn you about for these past 10 months straight now. And now that Jeff Bezos' Washington Post is digging up dirt, the media blitz has already begun. Speaking of media blitzes, we see that Rush Limbaugh now plays a clip on his program yesterday in which he pointed out that Donald J. Trump said that Hillary Rotten Clinton was a great Secretary of State. And he said that he was just doing this to see what type of reaction he might get out of the Branch Trumpidians. Unsurprisingly, they came back with the response that they typically do. Yeah, but Trump. Everything that Trump does is good and right, and anyone who says anything in the negative about their chosen messianic leader is obviously lying. Of course, that's not the way that reality works, and that is certainly not the way that this general election cycle will play out, folks. Again, we have warned of this. And as for Rush Limbaugh, why were you not doing this when the primaries mattered? Why were you not doing this at the same time we did some 9 to 10 months ago, back when it could have had a drastic impact? Because after all, you control a vast array, albeit shrinking, of a conservative audience. This shows that there has been a media blitz on Texas Senator Ted Cruz. They unfairly attacked him. They went out of their way to repeat every off-color statement made by the New York Vulgarian as if it was fact without doing any vetting, much like they didn't vet Barack Hussein Obama before both the 2008 and 2012 presidential election cycles. Again, it shows the bias of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media is coming home to roost again. They are doubling down on their propagandistic goals and agenda, and we can also rest assured that those agendas and goals do not have the best interests of the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people, at heart. In fact, it is diametrically opposed to our political power and ascendancy. It goes against the very foundational image that our founding fathers conjured up at the inception of this nation over 230 years ago. Again, these are the very things that we were warning you about. Now, to play the game of too little too late is an attempt to stop the leak that has hit the SS Rush Limbaugh. We're sorry, Rush, that it happened this way. We tried to warn you, but it will come out to fruition as the political tea leaves settle as they may. Be that as it may, we still have to come together to save this country. And that means saving this country either from Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Both are unacceptable. Both are wafflers and have no consistent position. Both will custom tailor their message to suit a particular audience in order for their own self-aggrandizement. Again, it's important to recall that in the past, Donald Trump had been Hillary Clinton's top donor when she was the senator for the state of New York, or even when she was the candidate for the New York senatorial office. That is an undeniable fact. It is something that the Washington Post will dig up. And yes, Rush was right to bring out his former praises of Hillary Clinton, which could almost play out like an endorsement, and we can be certain that the Fabian socialist spin doctors are already working on cutting an ad that would display just such a message. This is all disastrous. This was all the expected outcome that would result from selecting such an unacceptable and untenable candidate. Donald J. Trump is not a conservative. So many conservatives, including Mike Reagan, have come out and said this, including Thomas Sowell have come out and said this. Glenn Beck warned of this. And look at the sort of vitriol that he had to suffer through for it. Everyone attacked his religious beliefs. Everyone attacked his statements of a warning and damaging future. Well, he's not looking so crazy right now, with the way that Donald J. Trump continues to double down on his consistently inconsistent positions, the way that he backpedals and backtracks time and again, once again clearly shows that he didn't believe any of the things that he foisted upon us as his core beliefs. But the Branch Trumpidians don't care. They've drank the quaffade, as my first officer likes to put it, and that has blinded them to reality. Remember that some 8 months ago we warned you that blind rage would be used to manipulate you. That the Fabian socialists would twist this to their advantage. Now, it is true that it has yet to be seen whether she can outdo Trump. But to steal a line of hers, what difference at this point does it make? Yes, it's horrible what happened in Benghazi. Yes, that should work against her. Yes, she should be facing prison time. But she won't. If Barack Hussein Obama doesn't pardon her, perhaps her top donor will. Again, all in the name of doing business. You see, folks, these are the very real and drastic consequences we have been warning about for such a long time now. Political pandering and cronyism, I thought, was at the heart of the revolutionary stance that swept the gutless opposition party, or GOP, during the primary season. But we see that the outrage is selective. It is selectively implemented and not carried through, thereby ensuring that the status quo will remain for the most part. Don't think that Donald J. Trump has suddenly, magically, overnight, completely done a 180 as to who he really is. He will waffle and flip-flop to whatever thing he thinks can gain him an advantage. By coming out and saying that he didn't need, or indeed didn't even want, the conservative vote, nor did he want the full unification of the Republican Party, he was dooming himself to defeat. Because we conservatives will take him at his word. We will acquiesce to the demands of the Branch Trumpidians that he was some great businessman and that we just have to take it on faith that he is such a great and nimble negotiator. Yet he's not even attempting to negotiate with us. Rather, he would choose to negotiate with the followers of Vermont Senator Nerdface Boyd May Sanders to basically torpedo the conservative movement. Remember, it is such a shocking thing that he said when he said that it's not the Conservative Party, it's the Republican Party. Once again, this proves that those who attacked Texas Senator Ted Cruz for talking about his New York values, those of Trump, that is, from Trump's own words from an interview with the late with the late Tim Russert, when he said that his values wouldn't be the same as those of the people of Iowa, because they're New York values. Well, those New York values have come to be in full display now, in that he's saying that conservatives should just go join a conservative party, like the one that has come into existence in New York. Yet we see that one of the Mediaite acolytes of the so-called Conservative Party in New York, one Sean Hannity, has vociferously come out and endorsed Donald J. Trump, the New York Bulgarian, after feigning objectivity all throughout the primary season. Of course, that was a laughable joke back then, just as it is a laughable joke right now as I speak into this microphone. He was not objective. He was an active cheerleader for the New York Bulgarian. Why? Because probably deep down he shares those New York values. Already, Trump has said that he wants to raise the minimum wage and to enforce it at the federal level. Why? This goes against everything that is contained within the four corners of our Constitution. It tramples upon the very notion of the true tenets of federalism. And of course, that means it's also diametrically opposed to the natural law tenets that underpin this representative Republican government of ours. But it doesn't matter. Yeah, but Trump will be the crying refrain from the Branch Trumpidians as they link arms together and refuse to face reality. They say we are the ones that failed to face reality. They claim that this has been a war against us. They claim that we were the ones that were the so-called establishment of the gutless opposition party. Well, as David Limbaugh said, you cannot actually paint us as the establishment. We, the supporters of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, cannot be construed as establishment types. We were opposed to it. Yes, there are strange bedfellows that appear during an election cycle, but Donald Trump has had a fair number of those as well. I didn't hear any of the cries and exclamations that he was part of the establishment when he won the support of his fellow Orange Oompa Loompa, John Whining the Drunk Boehner. Didn't we all unite together to oust Boehner? Wasn't there a growing rebellion against the then Speaker of the House of Representatives? Of course. But that gets swept under the rug. They only selectively choose which aspects of the election cycle that they wish to focus upon. And they do that for propagandistic reasons. Another example of a Mediaite who used to claim she was against the so-called establishment wing of the Republican Party, but went on to champion first Chris Christie, then Mitt Romney, then Christie again, and then ultimately the New York billionaire, businessman, and real estate tycoon Donald J. Trump. However, she really championed Trump more so than she ever did any of those previous candidates, and she's now announced that she's going to be releasing a book in honor of her favorite candidate. She claims that this book is going to trace the odd ascendancy of Donald Trump and the revolution-like impact that it had on the gutless opposition party. I have a feeling that this book is going to be a dud. Annie, you pushed yourself into irrelevancy. Your little Yap Toto act, your little orphan act, is not going to stick well or sit well with the American people. Certainly not with true, pure constitutionalists. The 2016 election cycle will be labeled, perhaps, as the election cycle of betrayal. And I have a feeling that that is what this media blitz that is already beginning to amass against the New York businessman, billionaire, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian will show as well. The betrayal of the conservative movement never works well. It will doom the so-called Republican Party to a string of failures that were not seen since the time of Herbert Hoover. Remember, we warned, and then Thomas Sowell followed in warning, as we did, that Trump is this modern era's Herbert Hoover. He will be used to lambast conservatives when in fact there isn't a conservative bone in his body. That is, unless we come together and ensure that conservatives take a solidified and unified stance against the bombastic vulgarian. Trump does not represent who we are. Trump is not qualified to wield the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic. That is the message we need to send to the party bosses. If they want to continue to force us to acquiesce behind and support the lesser of two evils, then they weren't listening to the vows that we made after Mitt Romney was the nominee. Not anymore. We will not be cajoled into this anymore. The power of duress is fading. They say every election cycle that this is not the election cycle to stand up for our principles, that the candidate is far too bad, far too dangerous, and that it will be the end of the country. Folks, this is the type of fear-mongering that they've used to dupe us for well over 30 years now. And the truth is, we haven't really seen a staunch acolyte for the Constitution and pure constitutionalism since the 1920s in the presidency of Calvin Coolidge. Not even Ronald Reagan proved as staunchly conservative as the man of little words. You see, Coolidge was a true man of action. Coolidge was a man that understood that the way to solve America's ills, which were growing very rapidly under the failed presidency of Woodrow Wilson and with the steady incremental march of progressivism that dominated the arena of American politics before that, with Teddy Roosevelt founding the movement and several weak candidates following thereafter. You see that it comes down to a fight for the survival of the country, and Coolidge realized that survival must be based in the Constitution. That is the same message that we must acquiesce and adhere to now. We must demand that all levels of government return to strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution. That will be the only way that we unlock the chains and shackles of governmental tyranny, bondage, and servitude that blocks we, the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, from doing all that is necessary to return this nation to prosperity, to stop this cataclysmic death spin and spiral that the United States has been sent on through these past several presidencies, and has most certainly been accelerated under these disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. We had an opportunity to have a leader to spearhead this in Ted Cruz, and we must not abandon his efforts as they continue to go forward, unless he turns his back on the Constitution, but based on his track record, that is not something that is likely to occur. We must stand up to all of those who would continue to amass in an illicit fashion power and authority in the hands of the federal government. Recall that from the clear and concise language of the Constitution, it is easy to deduce that the Constitution itself is not only the supreme law of the land, but that the federal government is limited in both scope and power to trace its authority back to powers which are expressly enumerated to it within the Constitution itself. But the federal government has been so divorced from that for so long that many of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, many of the historical revisionists that now dominate our institutions of education from coast to coast and border to border, will try and claim that it is precedence, that it is now an unavoidable accepted fact of reality, and that the Constitution is some quaint, antiquated, and unimportant document. Well, folks, nothing could be further from the truth, because the Constitution, by its own language, is the supreme law of the land. It is the longest contiguous constitutional document in all of world history. Think about that. As I mentioned at the opening of this program, I went several days without power, and it gave me time to reflect upon just how much this world has changed since the inception of our shared Constitution. We have seen electric lights, recording of audio and video, and the meshing of audio and video in talking pictures. We've seen flight. We've seen the automobile. We've seen the moon landing and the space programs. Mankind has accomplished so many great things all throughout history. But one of those things that is not great, one of the things that could never be considered as mankind's greatest achievement, is socialism and Marxism. That has been the creed of death, destruction, depravity, despair, and despotism for well over a century and a half now. We see that everywhere it's attempted, it fails. Yet, we have selected a closeted Fabian socialist as the presumptive nominee for the once conservative party, the Republican Party. But now he says that the Republican Party is not welcoming to conservatives. Is this how he's going to negotiate? Like he said that he would call up Vladimir Putin and tell him to stop doing bad things? Isn't that a bit like the reset button we saw with Madam Clinton in the opening days of her tenure as Secretary of State? You see, folks, these are the unmitigated disasters that face us. These are the undeniable facts of life that face us. We have warned about it for 10 months now, and this nightmarish disaster will play out as it may. But that means that now more than ever, the Constitution's importance grows and must resonate in the hearts, souls, and minds of those of us who are committed to its strict application and to its preservation. The graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media will attempt to paint this as some radical, out-of-touch position. But they're fools to do so. That is not what this is all about. It is not radical, nor is it fundamentalist to stand up for the clear and concise language contained in the Constitution. It is not radical, it is not incorrect or fundamentalist to demand that our immigration laws that were passed by Congress be enforced, that we set our foot down and say no to touchback amnesty and indeed no to any form of amnesty. Donald Trump doesn't go far enough. Why? Because ultimately Donald Trump has used illegal aliens in his own past endeavors, and that he would seek the cheap labor as a quote-unquote businessman. Again, these are the realities that we have been warning about for 10 months. We can't say that we didn't tell you things would unfurl as they are. Folks, even before this current amassing media blitz was conjuring up against the New York Vulgarian, one of the things that my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I oft-times asked was whether Donald J. Trump was really serious about the presidency. If you recall that he fired all of his staff in the various primary and caucus states he won shortly thereafter, it means that he would be going into the general election during an uphill battle. Well, Trump has made yet another scathing example of how he is not really in this to win it. He came out today and said that he's not planning to run any negative attack ads against Hillary Rotten Clinton during the general election cycle. The reason being, he claims that he doesn't find them to be very effective. I find this laughable because he essentially had free media to attack Ted Cruz, and if you recall the way that he repeated the lie about Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz, being involved with JFK assassin Lee Harvey Oswald, this just goes to show that he really doesn't believe what he's saying here. He's acting like John McCain, who refused to go after Barack Hussein Obama during the 2008 election because of the cancerous doctrine of political correctness. Now, I find this very interesting because if we all recall, Donald Trump has put out that laughable platitude that he would rather be correct than politically correct. Well, the correct thing here would be to use and utilize every weapon in your arsenal to go after your opponents. What it is showing is that he has more zealously, more staunchly and actively gone after true conservatives than he has after his opponent that will face up against him in this general election. It reminds me of another laughable statement that he made shortly after Texas Senator Ted Cruz officially suspended his campaign for the highest office in the land. And that was that he had hoped that this general election would be a principled one about the policy differences and distinguishments between the Democrat Party and that of the Republican Party. What's so laughable about that is Donald Trump has not once been able to articulate his policy positions. He has not expounded upon his methodology or the way that he would achieve some of the lofty, vociferous promises that he's made. The reason he hasn't done any of that is because he doesn't really believe in it. He doesn't think that it will come to fruition, and he never really wanted the nomination in the first place. Now it is an ego trip. He's going to play it out as if it is some stupid episode of The Apprentice. Well, there is far too much at stake here in this once flourishing representative republic of ours to treat it like it's some sort of reality television program. You see, this is what our electoral process has devolved into. This is what happens when we don't embrace the Constitution. When we don't stand for anything, we fall for everything. Well, that is what is unfurling before our eyes in this election cycle thus far. And it goes to show that the vast majority of the narrative that went forward all throughout the primary season and process has been a great facade. It has been the greatest con job ever pulled on the Republican Party, at least in living memory. But I have a feeling that it's the greatest con job that has ever been pulled on the Republican Party in all of our relatively brief yet illustrious history as the republic that we know. And it goes to show that Trump just doesn't care, that he is still playing buddy-buddy with Hillary Clinton. And that, too, is something that we have warned you about for the past 10 months straight. Yet, we see that the Trump acolytes and followers are, without a doubt, adherents to Donald Trump. They are cultists for Trump. And this comes as an amazing thing happened. There were several Trump followers that gathered forth to sing their praises of their fearless leader. It is proof positive of a cult of personality. A single man dressed in what can only be described as Donald Trump or pro-Trump regalia and with a bullhorn was singing, "Open the eyes of my heart, Lord, I want to see you," in defense of Donald Trump from these pro-amnesty protesters that were at the event. And it's very, very frightening and chilling to see and even to hear. I've got the sound clip for it right here.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you.
You see that, folks? It has come down to hero worship, and that was put up on Twitchy, and it is wholly shocking to see, because it comes out to show that everything we've warned you about with respect to Trump and the way that he has become the Pied Piper for disillusioned conservatives is coming to fruition. But remember the dangers of following the Pied Piper. The Pied Piper ensured that the posterity of that town that refused to pay the high price would be dancing off or marching off to their doom. That is what's happening here. We are experiencing that now, and it is wholly frightening to see, because this sort of hero worship is the same thing that we saw with the acolytes of Barack Hussein Obama, both in 2008 and again in 2012. This sort of demagoguery is dangerous. It is diametrically opposed to the entire notion that we, the people, are the absolute and ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this republic. But that has been under threat and duress for a very long time now. Think back to the warnings that the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs made in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard about how in the 1950s the Fabian socialists had already infiltrated our institutions of high learning and high education, in particular Harvard University and law school in his piece, and were beginning their indoctrination. That was as early as the mid-1950s. We have not properly addressed that. And if we are going to see our nation flourish again, we have all got to do our part to spread the message of the Constitution, to teach people about the Constitution again. Because as we have said, going back to our first episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, the Constitution is the key. It is what will turn the tide against these Fabian socialists who are doing everything in their relentless goose-stepping towards power to undo this great nation of ours. Folks, the reason that our Constitution has been the longest contiguous constitutional document in all of world history is because it was revolutionary in recognizing that the people are the popular sovereigns, that all governmental authority must rest with the people, and that they delegate certain aspects of that authority to the government, that government cannot exist without the consent of the people. Well, we have fast approached a point in our history where we ignore that, where that has been swept under the rug, and it's being rewritten that only government can save us. That's the Cloward-Priven principle. Remember those two Fabian socialist academicians who came together and developed a plan to overwhelm government as it exists now, so that we could then turn to government to save us from ourselves? Of course, as we all know, that was an intellectually disingenuous method put forth, but it gives a rare insight into the twisted machinations of the Fabian socialists who want to destroy this country. And they will use our rights and our privileges and our inheritance, that of the Constitution, to try and destroy itself. That's what the ACLU was originally founded to do, and we see that they are playing it out in their attempts to infiltrate both of the standard bearers of American polity, both of the mainstay political parties. This is also why George Washington warned in his farewell address that we should avoid factionalization, because in so doing we would lose sight of the importance of the Constitution. That the Constitution is the only thing that truly unites us both as a nation and as a people. His prophetic words are playing out on the political stage right now. In America, we see that we are more divided than we have been since 1860. That was the time that we led up to the Civil War, and Trump is continuing to fan the flames of divisiveness in his attempt to divide and conquer. But what is his goal? What is he really looking to achieve and accomplish? Well, it's certainly not his policy positions, and not the policy papers that he clearly didn't write, and that he clearly didn't even read, because he's already abandoned them, like the tax plan, now like his moratorium on Islamofascism immigration, and like his stance on the federal minimum wage as well. If he does not take a consistent position, isn't he the same type of feckless, spineless weasel of a politician that his most ardent acolytes, like that man singing "Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord," were railing against all throughout the primary season? These are dark and twisted times we're facing together, folks. And we must put an end to it, because these dangerous cults of personality will tear this country apart at the seams and pit American citizen against American citizen. And we have seen the disastrous results of that from the Civil War. That was one of our most costly fights, and we waged it with such ferocity and animosity that the scars and wounds of it are felt to this very day. Recall the way that they attempted to once again lambast Southern culture with the Southern battle cross, battle flag, after that insane and senseless shooting that occurred almost a year ago in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. They went out on a tirade of political correctness, and if you recall, Donald Trump's stance at that time, far be it from the warrior of political correctness to stand out against it, claimed that the flag was fired. Yet, he had to walk back a delegate selection for the California delegate process who was an avowed white supremacist. We see that he opens his arms to people that he used to turn his back to, people like former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, and accepts them as part of his movement. Only when there was pressure brought upon him by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media did he attempt to walk that back. And then he said that it was disingenuous for them to make the claims that he was accepting that sort of thing. Well, he certainly wasn't going out and condemning it, just as he was going out and fanning the flames of violence. Yes, what the protesters did to him was wrong, but he wants to encroach upon our First Amendment liberties. Again, while he doesn't want to run negative ads or attack ads against Hillary Rotten Clinton, he was certainly willing to attack the rights of the protesters. He was certainly willing to attack the message of Ted Cruz. He was certainly willing to attack the family of Ted Cruz and the honor and virtue of Ted Cruz. How can we forget these things? The Branch Trumpidians say it wasn't important, or worse yet, they buy into it. They want to repeat the lies over and over again. Well, this comes straight out of the plan of propaganda that was put together by Joseph Goebbels. The principles of propaganda is that you first and foremost repeat a lie often enough that it becomes the truth. But they fail to make sure that it's boomerang-proof. We can throw it back at him, and we have thrown it back at him. But the Branch Trumpidians are so committed to their fearless leader that they're willing to stand out there and sing a song meant for God to represent Trump. You see, they've turned him into a demigod. They've turned him into some sort of deity. And remember that during the primary season, Trump went out and said that he could go out onto Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and he wouldn't lose a single supporter. Well, looking at the craved sort of support that he has, it appears that he was right. However, he's not going to be able to win the election on that alone, and the media blitz that is forming against him will ensure that there will not be a coalition that forms behind Trump. Ultimately, I don't think Trump wants there to be a coalition, because I don't think that Trump wanted this from the very start. That's certainly what his former Super PAC manager, Stephanie, said, and we've pointed to that on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Again, folks, there's a pattern here. A pattern that does not bode well for the Republican Party come this general election cycle. Trump embraces the two-dimensional stereotypes lobbed at the right by the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialists because deep down he believes that that is what Republicans and conservatives are. He then wants to be this great egomaniac that wants to redefine the Republican Party. He wants to ensure that there's no place for conservatives within its rank and file. Why would he do that unless his goal is to make this country continue to march down the path towards that Fabian socialist dystopia that we should all renounce, that has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America? Again, we have warned of these dangers time and again, yet the Branch Trumpidians chose to ignore it. They chose to ignore it because they have projected their own self-worth onto a candidate. Remember that we said blind rage and fury and raw emotionalism leaves one highly vulnerable and susceptible to the twisted machinations of a charlatan, a huckster, a con artist, a snake oil salesman, and carnival barker like that of the New York Vulgarian. Well, it's all coming to fruition now, and we told you it would. This is an I told you so moment, but I'm also doing it as an instructive moment, an instructive thing, so that we can sit there and defend ourselves when, as it will inevitably occur, the Branch Trumpidians come and try and lay the blame for Trump's defeat at our feet. We took Trump at his word when he said he didn't need us. Why go where we're not needed? Certainly, why go where we're not wanted? If that is his plan, that was what he negotiated. He is such a great, masterful businessman, and such a great and wonderful negotiator that some of his followers sing a church hymn for him and twist it to be about him. Why? Unless they really believe he's so great, and therefore we're going to take their word for it. They managed to make him the presumptive nominee. His defeat should therefore be on himself. His waffling and betrayal of the principles that he announced should be on himself. After all, isn't that just the price of doing business? Much like the media blitz that's forming against him now by Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post, is that not just the cost of doing business? You see, you can turn all of the defenses that have been pushed up or propped up around Donald Trump to also attack him. That's the two-sidedness of it. It's a double-edged sword. And we tried to warn the Trumpsters about it. But they were only convinced by fearless leader. They think that any and all negative statements about him are just attacks about him as a human being. I'm sure he's fine as an individual. He wouldn't be someone that I'd invite to my dinner table, but I wouldn't be grossly crass to him in person unless he pulled a stunt like he did with Ted Cruz's wife and family. You see, decorum has to have an important value in society. That's part of what it takes to be a virtuous republic. And that is what our founding fathers expected of us. That's not the cancerous doctrine of political correctness. The cancerous doctrine of political correctness would be to twist that around and to claim that that's white privilege, that it is white America working against minorities. Well, how is this going to play out with Trump? Trump has had this pattern of white supremacists supporting him. He's had a pattern of being slow to react to it only after it becomes quite clear and apparent to him that it would be disastrous for him in the polls. Why should it take that? That should be a no-brainer. He should consult his bigly brain and realize that the stance he took for leaving the Reform Party back in 2000 for David Duke joining it Back when he penned that op-ed article that he did, stating that Duke was the reason for it, that was the correct position. It doesn't take a rocket surgeon like Ben I'm a Victim Carson to figure that out. It is plain, open, obvious, just what you do in the course of being a true American popular sovereign. But it doesn't matter. We are to the point now that it's time for history in conjunction with pain to be the great teachers. Remember what my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, has said, that in this life there are two great teachers, history and pain. Think back to the adage of a young child who disregards his parents' frequent warnings of not to touch a hot stove. That child only learns why the parents have warned against that only after touching the stove. When you play with fire, you are bound to get burned. And that is what the Trump-vidians are going to have to learn the hard way. They chose to disregard our warnings. They chose not to heed our warnings, and therefore we must, through an act of tough love, allow them to make the mistakes they are going to make. Now, they said they'd be kind and gracious to the never-Trump rank and file, but that they would never forgive the punditry and commensurate that stood against the branch Trump-vidian movement. Well, I haven't seen the graciousness to the rank and file either. And if they want to make it a war, I can guarantee you it is one they will not win, because they are not fighting for principles. They're not fighting for the truth. As Aristotle said in his Art of Rhetoric, it is much easier to convince people with the truth because the truth is obviously more easy to believe. Well, truth is, Donald Trump is not a conservative. Donald Trump is one who waffles on every so-called conservative position that he has championed throughout his candidacy. And that is clear as day for us all to see. But if you don't want to believe that, then it shows you're not entering this discussion with an open mind. That's fine. Feel free to lambaste us as you have in the past. Feel free to attack our cherished listening passengers and audience as you have in the past. But don't expect our support, and don't expect us to submit to a tyranny of false unity. When the media blitz will come, as it's already shaping up, brewing like a storm on the distant horizon, don't come to us and complain, because we warned you about this. We warned you about this from the very beginning. We warned that Trump was a Trojan candidate. He is the Trojan Trump. He is there to unleash the twisted machinations of the Fabian socialist movement within the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. His goal was to make us so hopelessly divided that Hillary Clinton would be a shoo-in for the White House. All of the evidence is there. To close our eyes to that now at this point and at this stage in the electoral process would be to admit willful blindness, would be to disregard the truth. But that hot stove is approaching, and the branch Trump-vidians are reaching their hands out to touch the hot stove. And when they recoil, they will learn that very important lesson. But there will be a reckoning for the type of horrific sort of ad hominem and personal attacks that have been unleashed against the various candidates who have vied for the gutless opposition party's nomination. The followers, for the vast majority of them at least, will not bow down and acquiesce. Sure, some of them will. They'll buy into the fear-mongering as they have in every past election cycle. But the true die-in-the-will constitutionalists, and even some of the major detente wing of the gutless opposition party, will band in unity here. to say that Trump is unacceptable because of his vulgarian style and delivery. And folks, you can't say that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, haven't warned about that either. We have. And those chickens are coming home to roost. And the diametrically competing and conflicting points of views of Trump will be his downfall, just as it was for John Kerry in 2004. But the question is whether we can send a powerful enough of a message that the Herbert Hoover style of revisionism, where they tried to label him as a conservative, and where they tried to lay the blame of the Great Depression at his feet, despite the New Deal plans of Roosevelt worsening and prolonging the worst impacts of the Great Depression on conservatism. We cannot allow conservatism to go dormant as it did after the fall of Hoover. We must embrace our true beliefs, and we must vociferously demonstrate where Donald Trump does not adhere to those sacred principles that are a part of our movement and our lineage. You see, it comes down to we the people to save this country. It cannot be a singular individual or entity or branch of government. That is not the way that our founding fathers designed this representative republic of ours. They expected that duty and obligation, and most importantly, that responsibility to be carried out by the ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. The Constitution lays it bare in the preamble. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, do ordain and establish this government. You see, we created the United States. We are the ones that shall be responsible for its salvation and its continuing vitality and viability. No one else can. That is our duty and our duty alone. Because if you give the reins of political power to someone and expect them to be some messianic figure, you also hand them the power to destroy this country, particularly when they do not hold a consistent position, when they flip-flop on every issue of importance, as Donald Trump has. You see, the warning signs are all there. If we are willing to step back for a moment and to temper our emotions with logic and reasoning. This is why unfettered passion is dangerous, because it allows the charlatans and the carnival barkers to manipulate us. That danger is clear and present. It stares us in the face, and it is there, plain as day, for us all to see in objective fashion. Therefore, we must again stand together in solidarity and unity and defend the Constitution, spread the word of the Constitution, and live by the Constitution. With that said, it is now time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol so that you can find a different Blitz that's altogether more satisfying and pleasing than the media Blitz that will come against the ducking dawn. Also, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you might have either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX, and there you will find our departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page, which now has audio blogs on it, and our Cafe Press account, where you can buy all sorts of trinkets and goodies with our logo on it and our special first-class passengers logo on it to enjoy a Blitz of your own, or to dress up in style to go to the parties where you might get blitzed on your own. Go ahead and take a look at that, folks, and give us a little bit of support. Thank you again for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We'll see you next time. Do take care.